But let's make sense of what this means altogether. I'm now being joined by the special advisor to the president on the economic affairs, Dr. Tokwe Fasua, who is live for us virtually from Lagos. Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Fasua, for joining us tonight.
Right. Thank you very much, Sean, and it's good to be here.
Can you make sense of, if Ross, for those who say they are confused, how we are mentioning different budget cycles in different years? And this is perhaps a very unique or very different or very strange occurrence in the last few years, at least in the last 8 years. In our budgetary cycle, things had really changed in the last 3 years, where we had some carryovers, we have extension. What does this mean for those who think that maybe this government is very confused in its budgetary planning? What exactly is the explanation?
Well, I think you mentioned it in the last 8 years, so it's not only in the Bola Tinubu regime administration that this has happened. In fact, I remember way back in the Jonathan years, we used to have situations where the budget will not be signed off until August or September for the very year. However, the peculiar thing about the budget is that it's a law, and once the law has been made, it has to be implemented. So that's the reason why you find overlaps, because there are times when in a single year, for operational reasons or otherwise, you may not be able to fully implement a budget. But being a law that's been enacted and signed off, it still needs to be implemented. Therefore, it runs into the next year. Last year, we had the peculiar situation, especially because of the transition that happened between the Buhari and Tinubu administration. Because by the time the new government was coming in May 29, 2023, the budget for 2023 was already operational. Yes, the Buhari government did try to achieve something in the last about 2 years of the administration to ensure that our budgets were actually passed by January and culminate in December. But there were still times when, even in that administration, you find that even if you had planned for the budget to fully be implemented by December, it doesn't happen like that. It's we're dealing with human issues here, that many times it may not work according to plan, exactly according to plan. Now, this year, towards September last year, Mr. President did, or December last year indeed, he did send an amendment bill to the National Assembly to sort of, ensure that the 2023 budget was vitiated and taken out of the picture. Equally, the 2024 budget taken out of the picture. Then we tried to see how we could quickly manage the 2025 budget.
Well, Dr. Fasua, yeah. So if you look at it, and significantly, we've made a progress when it comes to normalizing and regularizing the budget cycle. And for most part of Buhari's era, and in fact from the Okonjo-Iweala time as being the coordinating minister of the economy, we've had budget presented in October and signed before January, and we've had a regularization of the budget cycle. But in the last few years of this government also, the cycle has been very irregular. And the regularization, there seems to be a planning problem with this government.
Right. Well, the regularization you're mentioning happened towards the end of Buhari's government, not from the beginning of Buhari's government. I remember.
But I'm talking back as even before the Buhari era, during Okonjo-Iweala time, budgets were being presented in October. And we were achieving a regularization of the budget cycle, even from the time of Okonjo-Iweala.
It didn't quite happen then. You can actually do the fact check and go back. It didn't quite. They tried to ensure it happened. It only happened in the Buhari government. But that said, these are human issues. Like I said, budgets are for people, not people for budget. So it's what works for people. It's what works for the ethos of the budget itself. If you have something to achieve for the people, then you have to do what you have to do to ensure it happens. However, like I said before, because of the transition of 2023, a budget was running already, which needed to overlaps, which the government of the day is ensuring that we regularize and normalize. However, you can also see, I think the most important issue now is to say that the size of the budget is growing, and because we need to plan for our people, this budget, this very one that has been signed off yesterday, is 50% capital. This is a government that is going somewhere, a government that has a big ambition to achieve for the people. And I think that's what matters, even beyond. Well, I can probably tell you that maybe in a year or so, we may be able to go back to January to December. It's good for the optics. It's good for the aesthetics of the budget. But substance over form, as we say in accounting, the point is, what is the budget? What is the budget trying to achieve? What type of budget are we laying? You know.
Let's get into that. Let's dig into.
Even the revenue projections has gone up than what we thought.
Dr. Fasua,
fundamental.
Dr. Fasua, I know you are happy with the figures. I mean, you are figure data trigger and figure happy man. When we are talking figures, you are always very excited.
I like big budgets. Yeah.
Let's talk about the figures now. 68.32 trillion. That's about, the president presented a 58 trillion budget proposal to the National Assembly, but what was passed eventually is 68.3 trillion and is about 10 trillion higher. Nigeria's largest budget ever. Is this ambition or fiscal overstretch?
Oh, well, it's beyond ambition. It's about strategy. It's about vision. Okay. I mean, listen, first of all, if you convert that to dollar, you realize that we still have one of the smallest budgets in the world. In 2018, I did that analysis, October 2018, and Nigeria had the second smallest budget per capita in the world after DR Congo. We were only better than DR Congo. Mr. President is aware of the small size of this budget per capita in dollar terms, where some other countries, even in Africa, are budgeting $2,500 for their people, like Angola, like South Africa. Nigeria is hovering around $150. With this one now, maybe we'll be able to get to almost $200 per person in this country in dollar terms. You know, so the point is this: first of all, like I said before, this 10 trillion that was added to this budget between when it was presented a couple of months back and now, all of that has gone to capital budgeting. For the first time, we're seeing 50% of this budget, being 32 trillion, are going to capital. Only 15 trillion is going to recurrent, with 15 trillion going to debt servicing. And of course, the revenue side has also gone up because we're using new numbers from FRS and customs. The tax review or tax reform has kicked in to ensure that we're raking more money for this economy. And a lot is happening. So this is very, very, for me, it's very heartening that this is happening at this point in time. And this is visioning. Already, the World Bank presented the Nigeria Development Review a couple of weeks back, where they showed that actually at the subnational level, the capital spending had tripled at the subnational level, even more than at the federal level.
But in your defense, Dr. Fasua, if I may cut in, quickly,
national.
Yeah, Dr. Fasua, in your defense, there are those who see it more a little bit different from the way you are saying. In fact, there are those who describe it as a budget disarray and an economic lackluster for this government, because extending the 2025 budget cycle deep into the year 2026 is seen as a lackluster, lack of planning, and lack of focus for a government that has this kind of ambition. And how do you then talk about prudence? How do you think about organization when this kind of confusion is in the system? How do you explain and defend it to the Nigerian people?
Well, for me, I look at it from, listen, first of all, remember you said yourself that we're doing the largest budget ever in the history of this country. That means you can translate that to be that we have the biggest plan for the people of this country than ever before. Honestly speaking, if next year's budget is 100 trillion, all well and good. Under a president that knows what he's doing, so I mean, people can, you as well as other people can describe the budget in any fancy way you want. The bottom line is that it's a budget that plans for the people. Why? So we're answering.
No, Dr. Fasua, don't let us confuse my question. Don't let us confuse the matter. My question is about those who describe the arrangement of this government in terms of budget planning and organization as lackluster. You have extended the 2025 budget cycle deep into 2026. One is running, it almost look like they are running concurrently. How do you defend that this government has focus in terms of planning?
Shehu, if you allow me to answer the question, you didn't allow me to land, so don't hurry me or, don't hurry me out, like that. So the bottom line is this: lackluster is a misnomer, is a misdescription of what's going on. We're not talking about lackluster is to say that it is lacking in color. But what you're seeing now is a budget that is colorful, a budget that is ambitious, a budget that is visionary. And so you're hammering on the carryover of last year's budget. I'm telling you that has always been a case in Nigeria, in almost every administration. Okay, and of course, because the budget is itself a law.
So does it make it make sense? Does it make it good? Does it make it something that is reasonable? It doesn't make it good.
No. But let me tell you, I'm also telling you that this is not about the fancy and the aesthetics of the budget, but the delivery of the content for the people. I'm telling you that for the first time, we're having 50% capital budgeting in this country. For the first time in perhaps 20, 30 years, or perhaps if ever. We've always had a scenario where the recurrent overrides the capital. Now you have a government that's actually thinking. I'm also telling you about the capital spending at the subnational, and you can't ignore that.
What you're not telling Nigerians,
I think that is what
Dr. Fasua, what you're not telling Nigerians tonight is the debt servicing, which is pegged at 15.8 trillion, Dr. Fasua. Isn't this a debt trap? Over $21 billion in planned borrowing. Does it make sense?
Whoever calls it a debt trap doesn't know what a debt trap is, Shehu. Because I've always been worried about the kind of rhetoric that the media pushes, But we keep moving and keep... Look, Nigeria is not overborrowed, so you can't talk about debt trap. Nigeria's debt is very sustainably managed. In fact, Africa itself owes 1.8% only of global debt. In fact, I've been pushing this and I've been writing about it. The world is not invested in Africa. The world is not invested in Nigeria. The debt of Australia alone is almost the total debt of the whole of Africa. And Nigeria is not even the first in Africa. Nigeria's debt is about the fifth in Africa. Yet we have perhaps arguably the biggest economy in Africa. So, listen, let's stop pushing these negative narratives and let's talk intellectually. What is the sustainable debt? What we need debt for? And any country that wishes to grow must actually take debt as it is. Our debt has been well managed since the advent of the debt management office. It was in the Second Republic, that we did not do well with our debt because everybody was borrowing. As a matter of fact, right now, the federal government carries 93% of Nigeria's debt, while the state carries only 7% of our debt. That means the federal government is carrying the bigger burden, but I'm of the opinion that the state should do better, because if you look at the policies of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he has actually favored the states. The states have been able to, some of them, like the Enugu state, have been able to increase its budget by 1,300%. And almost none of them is borrowing. Lagos has increased its budget by 400% since 2019. So look, there's capacity for us. In fact, right now, I'm of the opinion that the states should begin to come together and actually approach the market to be able to do infrastructure. Listen, why we need not spend on infrastructure? We need rail system to connect this country. We need a better energy system, including renewables in this country. We need roads, we need bridges. We need to invest in our children. What are we talking about? So listen, are we supposed to fold our hands and say we want our balance sheet to be very looking sexy, and then we refuse to budget properly? Now a government has budgeted so well for infrastructure, and we can see those infrastructure going on, especially at the subnational level. Because, however, we are only looking at the federal because we have heaped too much responsibility on the federal. But very little should actually happen at that level. Government only dictate the philosophy behind economics to the states as well. But the states,
Dr. Fasua,
the federal government.
Yeah, Dr. Fasua.
Yes.
On one hand, the government is projecting a revenue target of 34 trillion naira. And on the other hand, it plans to borrow 21 billion naira. Is this a balance in terms of planning?
No. The federal government is now increasing the revenue projection because the revenue, rather the expenditure projection has gone up to 64 trillion. Therefore, like I said before, maybe you didn't hear me, that there's a new number that is being taken on from the FRS and the customs. And the tax reform will ensure that even the government-owned enterprises will kick it. Of course, Mr. President signed Executive Order 09 a couple of months back to ensure that we get more of the revenue coming from crude oil and gas. And the last time, just 2 weeks ago, the NNPC paid in 1.7 trillion. These were monies that we never used to get. Look, Mr. President is not interested in, kicking the can down the road and, doing things the old way. We're trying to do something fundamentally different. And I can tell you that 2026 and beyond will be really, really different and positively different for the people of this country. So be looking at a revenue figure of about 40 to 45 trillion rather than the 34 trillion.
So again, you look at the implementation. Yeah. You see, the devil is in the detail, Dr. Fasua.
Right.
Devil is in the detail, Dr. Fasua. If I will respect you, if I will honor your word, I will probably go back to your track record, what you have done and what you have said. If I'm going to take your word for it, it's a matter of what I know you of and what you have done in the past. Take this government on what he has done and how he implemented the last budget. In terms of implementation, this government has performed woefully in the last budget cycle.
But I'm giving you,
for example, just a moment, sir, if I may put the question in. Just a moment.
Right, okay.
For example, an MDA coming out to say they got just about 30-something million in a full budget year. And when there are much more that was budgeted for that year. So in terms of implementation, in terms of releases of funds, the government has come out to say, we've got a problem. And there are those who will say, what this ambition that you have presented, is this a politically motivated plan that you have presented before Nigerians because of the elections? Are you really for real about what you are planning? Because in terms of implementation, your plans fell flat on its face in the last time.
Mr. Shion, we are in transition period. Mr. President has taken on reforms that nobody else dared to take on, right? The thing around subsidy, first subsidy, we save $10 billion every year. I'm telling you, the money is there in the States. I'm telling you, go and check the World Bank figures, the capital spending that's going on in the States. And of course, I know you're a specialist that say, no, Nigerians are poor, there's a lot of poverty. And however, we live in a new world where things will be happening, spending is happening in the state. People may face the federal government instead of facing the state. And if you're in the state, you have to make yourself available to be part of the constructions that's going on there, part of the spending, some of the capital spending that's going on there. So you can say what you have said, but the point is that we are a reform-minded government. We have done reform in fuel subsidy removal. We have done reform around the Naira. We have done reform around taxation, which nobody there. That reform on taxation is the first that have happened in Nigeria in 35 years. So look, except you want the president to come and kick the can down the road. The gentleman has said, listen, I'm not interested in kicking the can down the road. So listen, I want to achieve something, and he's achieving right now as we speak. So I disagree with your statement vehemently.
All right. Dr. Fasua, yes, I might be an expert in saying that Nigerians are suffering.
Yes.
Like you said, according to you. But Dr. Fasua,
yes,
maybe it's been a long time you went to your village in Ondo State.
I go very frequently, actually.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad that everyone in your state and in your village are rich. And that is a good news. I see a lot of poor people out there. And the figures about poverty in this country. And whether or not this budget is able to alleviate the suffering and poverty of Nigeria is that the question. I'm saying that, and as a journalist, it's a mirror of the society that we belong in. That's our profession. Now, the question right here is whether or not this document, this literature, and this presentation by the president is going to deliver on the promises made. Now,
exactly.
There are
I think we should
focuses,
Mr. President, for at least dreaming large for this country, of the people of this country.
And we're saying that the poor people should not be left behind. The increasing number of poverty and whether or not this budget will be able to meet those aspirations. The president said is a renewed hope agenda, and whether that agenda is renewing actually the hope of Nigerians is what I'm asking. And you are advising the president.
Exactly.
You might be under the pressure and you might not be finding it funny because maybe some of your advices are not yielding result just yet. but the president has a concern. He says some of these assumptions will determine whether some of the plans, for example, he said he's focusing on security, infrastructure, agriculture, social protection. These pillars of this administration really deeply going to be reasonable when we talk about economic strategy.
So, first of all, let me quickly clarify that. Listen, we have poor people in every country, every country, including the top countries of the world. So there are poor people in Nigeria, we admit, but our problem is actually not poverty. I thought that you'll be actually escalating that discussion because we may have an inequality problem more than a poverty problem. We may also have an informality problem that's bigger than the inequality, that's bigger than the poverty. Karl Marx said that, listen, that philosophers have analyzed the world to no limit. But the real issue and the real question is to change it. So whereas we can talk about poverty, but the point is how do we solve the poverty? So if you don't look at things like inequality, because we know that there's money in this country, 4.6 trillion was raised by banks in this country recently for recapitalization. We had a smooth recapitalization of banks, much better than what we had in 2005 and 6 under Governor Soludo at that point in time. And that money, 80% of it was found from this country. MTN is making 40% of its profit in this country for the past 24 years, straight up. So we cannot use poverty, this drumming up of poverty every time. Nigeria is not a poor country, but we may have a scenario where many people are making money, many people are poor, so we need to bridge the gap. We also have a problem with informality, which is the reason why this tax reform has come, so that the money that keeps escaping into that informal hole will be reckoned with and we can get the revenue to develop the country as a whole. That's the real question that we need to focus on. I want you, as an intellectual, to escalate your discussion beyond this ad nauseum mentioning of poverty. Nigerians are poor because of we are sending Nigeria down a rabbit hole, and we're not allowing ourselves to focus on what matters.
Well, I'm not the one who fabricated the figure,
in this country.
The poverty figure in Nigeria.
Let me land on this. That we should commend Mr. President for at least thinking big for the people of this country, for projecting something that's substantial. Let us challenge ourselves to be able to meet the revenues that we require to get to this, to be able to implement this expenditure profile that we have given ourselves. It is doable. This country has potential, massive. We've been talking about potential for so long, but this is the time. But it's not going to be a walk in the park for us to be able to meet up these potentials that we're talking about. So I think kudos to Mr. President for thinking big for the people of this country. And Nigeria is not a poor country.
But Dr. Fasua, I know that you love to hear what you want to hear, but you only don't like to hear what you don't like to hear. I mean, even to the deaf and to the blind, just a moment, sir. Even to the deaf and to the blind, you know that states are receiving more funds. And anybody knows that. You know that students are getting the loans from NELFund. Everybody knows that. That goes beyond saying. You know that some of the plans of this government, the difficult policy they are making, we know any reasonable person, even if you don't like this government, you know that they will yield results. But where things are not going right, I'm not a fabricator of the poverty indices in this country. And when I'm putting in those figures to you tonight, it's not because anybody does not like the face of the president or this government. We're just saying that let us debate on how these things can be better off for the average Nigerian people. But can you run away from the fact that some Nigerians are poor and they are in their millions?
We agree.
Millions.
We agree.
Millions. The problem, the issue here is the president said he will take a lot of them out of poverty. How many of them has he taken out of poverty? And the question is whether this budget will meet the aspiration as promised by President Bola Tinubu. That's the question.
The budget will meet the aspiration and the budget will continue to get bigger. That's what we're telling you. And I want us to change the way we think about some of these indices. Of course, even the World Bank can be wrong because, of course, what they do is they have their model and then they plug in the numbers and it tells them what's going on. It's left to us Nigerians to be able to know where our people are and who is poor. And beyond knowing how many people are poor and where they are located, the point is actually to ensure that they don't remain poor. So let people pay their taxes and the revenues of government so that we can even out the income inequality in this country. Let's reduce. Look, this country has one of the largest informal sectors in the world by proportion. About 70% of this economy is informal, not captured. I mean, we remember a couple of days
Fasua. Yeah. We've got to go. We've got to go, Dr. Fasua.
It's why it's certain Nigeria who owns so many properties in the UK and co. You know, all the money came from this country. We have 25 billion sitting in dorm accounts, about $50 billion sitting in people's vaults at home. Nigeria, there's money in this country. And so I
agree, there's a lot of money. The inequality is a problem, whether or not it goes around. But Dr. Fasua, thank you so much indeed for your time. I want you to have more sleepless nights for the sake of the Nigerian people. Do more work, you and your colleagues, so that what the president promised, you guys can make it happen. If not, we're not going to allow you rest. And I don't care what names some of you call us. But when Nigeria is better, we all. And you know you're Yoruba man, they say, Orun Yabo. Is over the heads. I mean, the heaven is falling. It's up upon everyone. So when the country is better, it's for the benefit of everyone. Dr. Fasua.
This government is trying to make it better, and I think you should also.
We wish you the success. Don't sleep.
Thank you very much.
Don't slumber. Do the hard work and let Nigerians benefit from it.
The hard work is going on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.